In our first two reports, we proved that President Trump's wall is not a wall, but a fence, very similar to that constructed under the Secure Fence Act of 2006. We also explained that while the Secure Fence Act is still the law of the land and gives Trump the authority to build his fence, he must show that it is the most appropriate way of achieving operational control of the border. The Secure Fence Act defines operational control as the prevention of all unlawful entries into the United States. Last fiscal year, the Border Patrol apprehended almost 400,000 people at and near the border. Some say the Border Patrol catches only 1 in 2 or 1 in 3. One comprehensive sample found more gotaways than apprehensions. More than 10 years ago, Senator Elizabeth Dole said we needed border metrics.
In the 86 vote, that this did not provide the security at the border that we're promised again today. 2006, the Secure Fence Act, 700 miles of fencing to be built. Only 2 miles have been built. And so my view, my strong view is it's not just promises, it's proof that people want. The American people want to see results, control of our borders, and we need to establish standards or metrics and then show that they've been achieved.
Peter Drucker, the father of modern management, said, "If you can't measure it, you can't improve it." Despite repeated calls for an objective measure of border security, as we approach the year 2019, we are still operating in the blind. The Migration Policy Institute, considered by some to be liberal on immigration policies, recognizes the need for metrics.
The word or term operational control has been used a lot since I've been in Congress, and no one has really been able to define to me what operational control truly is. So I'm going to ask the panel, all 4 of you, what is operational control of our border in your opinion? Now I'll start with Ms. Barrett. Let's go back toward the governor. Ms. Barrett.
When CBP used that measure a couple of years ago, there were a lot of different factors that went into calculating it. It was apprehensions, turnbacks, estimated flow coming across the border. It was pretty sophisticated in how they went about approaching that. Currently, they're really just looking at apprehensions, which we don't feel is a great measure. It's an indicator, but we don't think it's a great measure for assessing control of the border. So my response is I don't think CBP has a good definition of what operational control is today. They've been working on trying to come up with that definition. Now they're saying it may take until 2014 to come up with it. We think it's critical. We think CBP needs to be the ones to define it since they're managing the border, and I'm sure Congress will ask GAO to look at it once they do define it, but right now they just don't have a good measure for operational control.
Mr. Nelson.
Current law defines operational control as the prevention of all unlawful entries.
Mr. Nelson.
I would measure it more along the terms of effectiveness. How effective are we being at achieving the mission? They have been effective at keeping terrorist attacks from happening in the United States. DHS has been. The effectiveness of the border, how you measure those with apprehensions or whatever metric you use, is never fully going to capture that. I think it's also difficult to capture how effective you are when you're still dealing and struggling with issues about immigration reform, which I know is an issue that the Congress is taking on this year. But again, how do you measure effectiveness when you don't know what the strategic guidance may be from Congress or from the President on these particular issues, because we're still waiting to hear that, and I think that'll be important going forward.
Right. Mr. Reese.
The guidance from the President on this particular issue was reported in the New York Times about 1 month following this hearing. President Obama did not want a single measure of border security.
I first have to say, border security is not an issue that I specifically focus on at CRS, and I think it's actually a good analogy when I was discussing this idea of what is Homeland Security. And as we're talking, and the very people, the very agency responsible for operational control are having a hard time defining it, and we're using words like terrorism and immigration and customs. And I think it comes back to this idea of we don't have this concept yet, or we have a concept, but it's according to who you speak to. And until we actually have the discussion like we're having now, we're going to continue to wonder, what do words mean? What does operational control of the border mean? I don't have an answer for you, Congressman.
Governor.
Well, it's a term of art, and what in fact really does it mean? It's a government talking to itself about what it's trying to achieve. Operational control, I don't know if we have operational control or not. It's a incident of American sovereignty as to whether we have control over our borders or not. But at the end of the day, if we think that we're not bringing cocaine across the southern border, we're kidding ourselves. We know.
While there may be confusion on the part of many as to what the term operational control of the border means, in his executive order dealing with border security, President Trump cites the Secure Fence Act as his authority and includes the term operational control 6 times in his order. Most importantly, the Secure Fence Act requires evidence of operational control in order to determine what kind of border security system is most appropriate. Richard Stana was GAO's expert on border security when he testified before Congress regarding the use of the term operational control. Stana said the problem was that Border Patrol didn't know how many people it missed. It was like knowing how many times a player got a hit without knowing how many times he had tried. In our next issues report, we will show how it is possible to count every illegal border crosser.